recorded and started, so we will save it and share it later. Good evening, everybody. Another LinkedIn live training session here from me, Alfredo, your Microsoft certified trainer and founder of D365 Trading, your Microsoft Trading Services partner. Today, we're going to spend a bit of time on inventory management and how inventory flows throughout the manufacturing process. I am currently working with not one but two food manufacturing companies in the UK who share a common challenge, understanding how inventory flows throughout the production and manufacturing process. I worked with manufacturing clients for many years, so I've worked with them for many years. And when we approach the inventory management intricacy throughout in manufacturing, and we work with construction companies, for example, or engineering companies, I noticed that the inventory management flow is more intuitive, mostly because food companies, and that also applies to pharmaceutical manufacturers, pharma, which I also helped. I have one pharma company that I'm working with at the moment in Germany. So food and pharma have this thing in common. They have a rather complex inventory management requirements, because throughout the manufacturing process, it's not very easy to understand work in progress. The semi-products, right? Think of a bakery. We have raw materials, we have flour, we have milk, we have sugar, we have salt, spices, right? And then throughout the mixing process, and before we can actually end up with the baking and then packing the actual, products, bakery products that we sell to supermarkets, maybe restaurants, there is a stage in which inventory is somehow in a black hole, right? In the air, in the cloud, and it's not easy to count how many, units of this unfinished loaves of bread you might end up with. Of course, we have the mix, the batter, which means you might have kilograms or liters, but then we touch catch weight and things get very, very complex. So, without going into too much complexity about catch weight and WIP in terms of accounting terminology, I want to spend a few minutes today going through what Business Central, and Business Central in particular, does very well. However, finance and operations, Dynamics 365 supply chain management does it also incredibly well. But it's far more complex. But again, Business Central can manage that kind of complexity. The challenge, though, that most food companies face when they approach Business Central is that inventory management and WIP can sometimes be counterintuitive because of the terminology. And just really about the terminology. So today, let's spend some time learning and familiarizing with this terminology, because once you get the foundations right, even though inventory management and manufacturing is objectively rather difficult, rather complicated, once you get these foundations right, everything else will follow quite easily. As I said, I decided to start to do this training because I'm working with two food manufacturers at the moment, and they both face the same challenges. So this is also an opportunity for my clients to check this training, and of course, if the same applies to you, if you are a functional consultant who work with food companies or might want to learn about inventory management and manufacturing for food companies, you might want to pay attention, because we're going to learn some core concept that makes Business Central different from other manufacturing, or I will say ERP software, right? So let's get started. Before we dive into Business Central, let's just go through a quick recap. And I love using a good spreadsheet because who doesn't love a good spreadsheet, right? So, when we talk about manufacturing, we often identify inventory or items into three categories, and Business Central does that in the Kronos database. I will show you later in a minute. But most other software, most ERP software, let's say, I'm going to put it here so we can find it a bit easier. There we go. And so this is going to be the other ERP software, right? Differentiate between raw materials and finished goods. And so far, it's nothing strange, right? Raw materials, just to use the same example of the bakery, raw materials are my flour, water can be raw material, right? An ingredient, right? Salt, spices, right? Anything that we use to consume throughout the manufacturing process. And the finished goods is what we end up with, right? What we sell. However, this differentiation between two product categories is oversimplified, and it doesn't really help us understand the processes and the setup and the configuration that we must apply when we want to use an ERP like Business Central. Because in fact, most food manufacturers, again, this applies to most manufacturers, not just food, but let's stay in this example because this one explains it very well, usually have at least three categories. And in a Kronos database, we can actually find it in the inventory posting groups. And the inventory posting groups here, you can see, show three type of posting groups. Now, you might think, and if you like me, you're a consultant with many years of experience, that is just a Kronos database, it's just demo, right? Oh, it's just Kronos demo data, where ultimately we have finished items or raw materials. There is a good reason why we have three categories here. Because in most manufacturing environments, we have a third element, which in most organizations is called a WIP item. Now, this is not to be confused with work in progress, which is a purely accounting term to identify the value of my inventory, which has been reworked, right? Essentially, something that we use to track the production life cycle when we close the month, only for accounting purposes. But for planning, for inventory management purposes, a WIP item or a work in progress item or a semi-product, right? A BOM item, depending on different industries and different software call it in a different way, is essentially the third stage, in between stage, when we have a semi-product. And if we stay with the example of a bakery, the raw material will be the ingredient. The resale is the finished item. What we sell is the loaf of bread, right? We sell it to our clients, right? And so, what is the finished goods? What is the WIP item? It's the butter, right? It's the mix. Oh, it can be I don't know, it can be the pizza base, right? If this is a pizza, which we sell, finished, right? With all the ingredients and the toppings, well packed and labeled, ready to go to the supermarket, to the stores. We need to use flour and yeast and salt and everything, and to create the base. The base is a WIP item, which in Business Central terminology is still finished goods. Now, stay with me because you might find it counterintuitive. You might argue, well, it's not. A base is not finished. It's WIP. It's work in progress. And so my argument is, why is it not finished if you can count it? If you can count the pizza bases, right? If I close the shop floor today and I walk around the warehouse, can I count the number of pizza bases that you have in the fridge, ready for tomorrow's shift to start, so they can use the bases, put different toppings, and make different pizzas. If I can count it, it's finished, right? Let's try to forget what we know about the terminology, because when we start using a new software, what we know already about the terminology, it's not knowledge that we can apply as it is to the new software. We must learn that it's that it's different, and for a good reason. So this is the idea. This is the concept in most ERPs like Business Central Finance and Operations and other advanced software. A finished item is something which is finished, which means it is an item. It's a physical object that I can count, I can measure, I can write off if I want to, I can dispose of, right? I can reclass, I can transfer from one location to another. It's finished. And so what we typically call finished goods, if we're using simple accounting, right, a simple accounting software, and we manage our shop floor with spreadsheets, like my clients like us do, the finished item that we sell for a profit that we have on a sales order is the resale item. So, which is also a finished item because I can count it, right? But if you think about it, raw material is also counted, right? Countable. So, as long as we can count it, it's an item. And depending on the use, it can be finished goods, raw material, and resale. What is not countable is WIP. Work in progress is not countable, right? It's this unique mix of different things, right? Flour and salt and tomato sauce, right? And everything together. So, if we use the WIP terminology, if you use WIP to call our WIP items, our finished goods, which is the pizza base, we get confused with accounting WIP. And then training and learning the new software and testing it becomes a nightmare. So let's go back to Business Central now and let's find out what these three categories are. Raw materials are used as components, right? We consume components throughout the manufacturing process. Raw materials are typically replenished by a purchase order, or it can be a transfer. We purchase raw materials, we store them in stores, right, in a warehouse, and then we transfer raw materials, or we issue raw materials to the shop floor when we start when we release the production order. As we release the production order and we consume components, we end up with value in WIP, but it's only accounting. Once we have created some semi-products, so my pizza base, the pizza base is a finished goods, and the finished goods is also a component. And it's a component because I'm going to use my bases to make pizzas, right? And so how are finished goods replenished in a production life cycle? Well, we have production orders, right? We make production orders. It can be the same production order that we use for a pizza if this is a make-to-order replenishment policy. We make pizzas on order, and then every time we have an order for a pizza or for 50 pizzas, we make the base, right? And so a restaurant will have a make-to-order pizza base, right? While a food service company or a company that sells ready-made pizzas for supermarkets might want to store some pizza bases, or at least a buffer stock, some safety stock on their bases in their warehouse. Regardless, that will be a production order with a make-to-stock policy. And so we have the resale, and the use for resale is for sales, right? So the user is on sales orders. And how we replenish that, we also replenish that through a production order. So three categories for inventory management purposes, which reflect the inventory posting groups, because most accountants want to see the value of these three categories into separate ledgers in their balance sheet. Because for reporting purposes, inventory reconciliation, this is extremely important. And therefore, we want to use these categories. As such, if we go back to Business Central, we can see that in my Cronus database, my demo database, with all these made up customers and vendors and items, I have three posting groups. And so the raw material items use an inventory account 64100, which is a raw materials balance sheet as an asset account. And when I look at the finished items, I have a different account, which is finished goods, which are my WIP items, my pizza base, raw pizza base. And then I have the resale item, which is the finished pizza, which is, you can see, goods for resale. So, goods for resale is your product finished, packaged, labeled, ready to be delivered to the customer. Finished item is a countable item which is made out of a production order, is not purchased. It's finished because it's countable, but it will be reused and consumed when we make the item that we sell. Three categorization that follow the typical structure of traditional manufacturing software. Old school shop floor managers still use this terminology. As a functional consultant, as a user, you must learn that, of course, nothing stops you from renaming this third category WIP, but keep in mind that Business Central uses a WIP account. And WIP in manufacturing is extremely important and can be very complex. The last thing you want is to change the terminology of your new system and to make it closer to terminology of an old system and end up confusing the team. Because if you use the same word to identify two things that are very different, then you end up, of course, confusing. So, the team. So, let's go through a quick walkthrough, because 17 minutes, this was the introduction, and for the next 12 minutes, if you want to follow along, if you are at your desk and you have Business Central open, maybe you can open your sandbox environment, because we are going to start actually with an example. And I like doing this without any kind of preparation, because that allows me to explain everything step by step, as opposed to giving you a very polished demo, which requires 2 days of prep and configuration, and your environment is not set up, it's not configured. You cannot follow along. If you cannot follow along, you just watch me doing stuff. You will never really get it, right? So let's start creating a new item, shall we? Now you can see now, if I click new item, I have an item, 3 categories. Item, non-inventory, and service. Now, because all my 3 categories are all about items that are countable, right? That I must be able to count. The raw materials, the finished goods, and the resale item must be items, must be of type inventory. Now, there is an exception to this rule. Raw materials sometimes can be non-inventory, but as a separate conversation that requires, again, probably another a dedicated workshop, because there are limitations, but also there are some intricacy in terms of accounting and how to value the non-inventory consumable. It's a bit more complicated. So let's stick with this very simple example. Flour, yeast, and water, raw material. Pizza base is my WIP, finished item, and the pizza is my resale item, right? So let's go back and let's use the item template because it must be an inventory item. And this is my flour 00. And it's going to be organic because we want to only good quality stuff for our pizzas. And this is a bag of 20 kilos. And shall we see if we got a bag? Yes, there we go. We got a bag as a unit of measure. Perfect. So my flour, 20 kilos bag, it's a raw material, and I'm going to now fix the posting setup so that I use a raw material product posting group. I want to use a raw materials inventory posting group, and it's not vatable because it's flour. And so this is a very rudimental setup. Let's say, how much do we pay for this one? It's 20 kilo. It's a very expensive flour. We pay 40 pounds, £2 per kilo, right? High quality organic flour for our high quality organic pizzas. So once we get now we have the flour, and we're pretty much okay. We can work out the replenishment tab, which we see we replenish it. Actually, let's finish it. We buy flour from worldwide importers and we purchase it in bags. Notice that the purchase unit of measure is always the base unit of measure by default. There's no need to change it. If I didn't have it, it wouldn't matter. Business Central will use it. We use the right one regardless. And so under the planning tab, we want to use a fixed reorder quantity. And with fixed order quantity, once I end up with 20 bags, I want to reorder 60 bags. And that's essentially how I'm going to do it. Again, I have multiple locations here, so I should create SKUs. But again, we're not going to talk about replenishment here. Replenishment requires at least a couple on webinars, maybe a couple dozen probably. But again, let's stay, we're not going to do MRP and MPS here. We're going to talk about the structure. So we have our flour and it's our item 1,000. Perfect. So I'm going to now create the new item. And in this case, you can see I could have created, we used, salt, yeast, but you get the idea, right? Now it's time to get the finished goods, my pizza base. Again, I call it finished goods. I know that some of you listening to me say that a pizza base for a finished pizza is also a finished goods might feel horrified. But again, stay with me because in Business Central, the terminology is different and so we must learn it. I'm going to create a pizza base now. This is going to be a pizza base. And this is going to be organic. And in this case, we're going to make it in pieces because one individual base is one unit, right? And the general product posting group now is going to be, now we go, we have raw material manufacturing. For product posting group, it might also be raw materials. And so, but for inventory posting group, it must be finished. Now, in general product posting group and inventory posting group sound similar, but they do something very different. So let's forget for a moment about this one because it's irrelevant. And do we need to apply that to our pizza base? Probably not. And if I never sell my pizza bases to another food shop because I only use my pizza bases for production, I can leave the VAT posting group empty because there's no tax that apply to the fact to my pizza bases when I consume them to make the finished pizzas, right? And we don't care about the FIFO because it's going to be calculated automatically. But now I need to tell the system that this pizza base organic is made throughout a production order. Therefore, this part is going to be no longer relevant. And here it's about what I said before about the replenishment, right? Do we make this only when we have an order for a finished pizzas? Again, typically a restaurant would do that, right? Or do we make pizzas primarily for the purpose of making the finished products, the pizza that we sell, but we can keep some bases aside in the fridge just in case I get a big order and I don't want to follow behind schedule. So I might have some pizza bases on the side. In that case, it's still make to stock. Now, we need to do the routing and the production bill of materials. And if we want to use a just-in-time production policy, using a make-to-stock, but a just-in-time policy, I can say, let me use a lot for lot. And maybe let me accumulate the lot only for 2 days. So we make pizza bases every 2 days. We make pizzas every day. So I keep my inventory as fresh as possible while allowing me some buffer in case the demand fluctuates. So they may be very busy, they might not be. We might not be so busy. So we keep the shop floor agile. If one day we don't need to make the pizza bases, we don't make them. And here, of course, we don't really care too much. We can talk more about manufacturing here because now we can have the lot sizes, so which is the let's say economic order point, right? Reorder point for a production order. That means how many pizza bases is more convenient for my shop floor to make at any given time based on my shop floor costs, essentially, right? So it might not be ideal to make a single pizza base because we don't want to turn on the machines and get people to work on expensive equipment for one pizza base. So let's say we will make 50 at any given time. Again, this will affect costing and production planning, which is beyond the scope of this video. We're going to create a routing, and in this case, the routing is going to be for my pizza base, and the routing tells Business Central the operations to create my pizza base. So let's say we want the machine department to do the mixing, and we want an assembly department to do final inspection. Again, oversimplified. Okay, you get the idea. So we take 2 minutes to mix the batch, to mix each pizza, and 2 minutes again to inspect the pizza base. Maybe 2 minutes to inspection is a bit too much, but again, you get the idea. I'm going to certify the routing. And now I'm going to put the production bomb here, which is again is going to get the pizza base organic. And I want to use the organic because we're going to make it in pieces. We're going to use pieces. And I use the word organic here because I'm going to use my organic flour. And so a different bill of materials if I have a non-organic pizza, right? That requires a different kind of flour. And so how many bags per piece? Again, given that the batch is 20, this is probably 1 divided by 20. 0.05 is the right number of bags for one piece. Okay, so we make pizza bases. Actually, that will end up with 1 kilo of flour per pizza base. It's going to be an enormous pizza, right? We don't want an enormous pizza. So let's make it 0.005. There we go, small pizzas, right? Only 100 grams of flour. Right, and I can add more items here. I can put water, I can put salt, spices, yeast. But again, you get the idea. We don't need to do that, right? I'm going to certify this bill of materials. And now I got the pizza base organic. And now I am pretty much done here, right? Again, some organizations will call it this a WIP item. But again, this is the concept. If at the end of the production of the shift, I can physically count your WIP item, as far as the ERP is concerned, that is a finished item. It doesn't mean that we sell them. We don't sell pizza bases, right? We must be able to count them. It is a finished item. Because WIP, again, in Business Central, I repeat myself, but it's very important, is a purely financial and accounting term that touches a lot of areas of the system, and we might easily get confused if we start calling items WIP, because, again, are not WIP. So, the last item that we're going to put together now is the pizza tomato organic premium. And this is what we sell to our supermarkets. We might sell it in boxes of 12 because it goes to the supermarket shelf, right? But again, more complexity that Business Central can manage and handle very well with no issues whatsoever. The next thing we're going to do now, we can pretty much leave these as they are, because now we have a product for resale. What we sell is the actual pizza. The posting groups are pretty much right here to me. Right now, we can talk about probably the fact that this VAT product posting group might not be correct. But again, food product that you sell to a supermarket might be VATable, might attract full tax. But a different food product, which is a semi-product that you sell to a restaurant, maybe it does not attract VAT. But again, taxes, that's a separate conversation. All right, so we can leave the financials as they are because this is correct here. So the premium tomato pizza organic is now going to be replenished through a production order, right? We are here. This is the pizza organic, right? There we go, the resale pizza here, right? And so we still make it to stock because we want to keep a buffer. Again, if we are talking about a restaurant or a food service business, they make fresh pizzas for cafes. They freeze the pizzas and they deliver it as they are. They might be able to make fresh pizzas every day using a make-to-order. Which or just in time. Again, replenishment and planning is a huge subject, and we probably need to spend, days. But again, if you want to learn more about material requirement planning and MPS, you can always book a consultation with me or a member of my team, and we can put together a bespoke training for your team, whether you are a consulting company or a food service company who wants to use Business Central. So back to our example, we are going to choose a new routing. This is the pizza tomato premium, and we also make it in pieces. And in this case, the production bill of material will have the item, which is the pizza base. Right, and we use one base per pizza, which makes sense, right? And here we will probably have something more, right? For example, there we go. We have the tomato sauce, right? Let me make it nice. Not sauce, tomato sauce. Okay. Again, more about replenishment and cost and posting. So, what will be the tomato sauce now? Guess what? Tomato sauce is a raw material because we purchase the tomato sauce and we use it as an ingredient. This time it's a component of the resale item. It's not a component of the finished goods item. Unless we buy the raw tomatoes, we make the tomato sauce ourselves and then we use it and we consume it in a pizza. Again, if you're a restaurant, you pretty much work like that, right? In that case, we will have fresh tomatoes as raw materials, tomato sauce as your finished goods, make to order, right? You cannot make tomato sauce 2 days in the past because you're gonna get you want fresh ingredients for your pizzas, right? And then you end up with the actual resale item. Yeah, you can see how you can manage that you can manage that kind of complexity, but mostly, I can say 3 categories are all you need, right? And so the tomato sauce, there we go. So we want, I don't know, half a liter tomato sauce, maybe a bit too much. Let's say 250 ml of tomato sauce for a pizza. It's a very rich, tomatoey pizza. Almost dinner time. I think I'm going to get one for dinner now. Since we're talking about pizza, that made me a bit hungry. So I'm going to certify this production bill of materials here. And what about the routing? Well, the routing can pretty much use the same pizza base routing, right? And let me see, I want to copy this one. There we go. But this one is going to be the organic pizza premium organic. And so you will have the mixing, the final inspection, and maybe we want the packing department, right? We need to pack this pizza. Otherwise, how I'm going to ship them. And so what we normally do, we use an automated packing machine, only 1 minute to pack a pizza and label it. And off we go. We are ready to load the lorry and to do the delivery. Your example makes me hungry, Andreas. The same, Andreas. The same. So it's perfect example, right? Dinner time, we talk about, making pizzas. So once this is certified, then we can start going through the manufacturing process. So what happens now that we have these 3 items, right? What I'm going to do now, I'm going to make, let's say, I'm going to simulate what would happen if we had our planning and replenishment policies all set up and configured, and we have demand, we had orders, which of course I don't have time to create one from scratch now. But that part, of course, something we can do later when we talk about MRP and MPS, Master Production Schedule, and MRP, Material Requirement Planning. That would essentially create at least 2 production orders, if not 2 production orders and a purchase order, right? So the first, let's say, firm planned production orders that our plan should create is a production order for the organic pizza base. And because the organic pizza base batch quantity is 20, right, we're going to make 20 bases, or we multiply the 20 by the number of batches that we need, right? If we need 200, we need to create 10 production orders. Sorry, we need to get a multiple of 20. Ideally, you want to create ideally, you want to create 10 production orders of 20 pizza bases. But then that's a separate conversation, because now we are optimizing our operations, we're optimizing our costs. Now, I know that it might sound counterintuitive to you. You must say, Alfredo, why would I create 10 production orders for 20 pizzas instead of creating 1 production order for 200? Surely the single production order is more efficient. Right, it is efficient as far as the application is concerned. For software, right, for the app, and for who creates the order. If I create the order manually, it's easy for me to do something like this. However, because my pizza base organic is set up and configured with a 50, not 20, again, with a lot size, the cost, the planning associated, the planning element and capacity, let's say, elements related to the planning and the production of this pizza makes it so that it is ideal, more economically, more viable to make a single production order of 50 and multiply it by the number of, to get to the point where I have the number of bases I need. Again, this is about capacity planning, this is about costing, and it might sound, again, counterintuitive, but in some cases, 10 orders of 50 is better than an order for 500. Again, something for another day. So if I refresh the order now, if my item is set up correctly, I should have something like this. I have the planning characteristics, the planning elements. You can see the routine and capacity tells me that I need to start at 12:40 to finish at 4 in the afternoon. Again, you can see 11:25 here. This is my sandbox. And when you are a Maxo partner using a demo sandbox, dates are often either in the past or in the future. It's just how demo environments work in Business Central. But let's forget about the dates. You can see I will finish by 6 in the afternoon so that the day after the team can use the 50 pieces of pizza base to make essentially the finished, right? And so I'm going to release this order so that the shop floor can start working on it. And the next production order is going to be for the premium pizzas. And because we have an order for 50, I'm going to make also 50 pizzas. And so we will manage scrap and variance. Again, that opens the door to days and days of conversations and training that, of course, is a very complex subject. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back and refresh the order, and now I have the premium pizza here. Now, if I dive deeper into the components of my pizza, you can see that the bill of materials is pulling a raw material and a finished item, right? Because the pizza base organic, and I go back to this part here, there we go, this is it. And so you can have a mix of these two, but ideally what you sell, it's this, what you consume, but you replenish to a production order is a finished item. What you consume and you purchase from a vendor as it is, it's a purchase order. And now, as we go through the manufacturing process and we consume raw materials and we register capacity, we register labor, now the three categories, inventory posting groups, will take care of the posting. When I start the production of the pizza base and I consume flour, Business Central will use the raw material inventory posting group and move the balance from this account, which is the raw material account, and it will move it into WIP. That's why we cannot call the pizza base WIP, right? And then once I end up with the pizza base, Business Central will do the same, right? The output will put value on the inventory in the finished goods. Now, as I said before, traditional, old, rather simple ERP and manufacturing process see the pizza base as a virtual item, as a WIP item, which is uncountable. But that is not right, because, as I said before, as long as I can walk through your shop floor or through your warehouse and I can count the number of pizza bases that you just produced today, that pizza base is a finished goods. Now, the value of that finished goods pizza base can be categorized as WIP inventory. But again, WIP inventory, let me go back here to inventory posting setup. Inventory posting group. The WIP inventory, it's not to be confused with this WIP. And this is where most of the configuration or most of the setup goes wrong in manufacturing. And this is also why we need to spend more time with training, more time testing, and ensuring that the configuration is right. Because if you create an inventory posting group, this is what I've seen with one of my clients, not the other. because I told you I'm working with 2 food manufacturing companies at the moment. One of the 2 decided, because the consultant working with them advised them to do this, they did this. They created a, there we go. They created a WIP. This is a WIP items, right? And they ended up doing this. And now, once their WIP account in their chart of accounts, work in progress, finished goods, and we can talk more about why Kronos calls this work in progress finished goods, because again, but it's purely cost accounting, purely manufacturing cost accounting, which we can spend half an hour on it if you want. Actually, leave a comment below and tell me if you want me to do a LinkedIn live training for cost accounting in manufacturing, because it's a complex subject, and trust me, even expert consultants get it wrong. And this is why we and my team often comes and help. We start doing a training. So actually, but my system tells me something else. And then I say, well, what have we just done here? Let me show you. And once we get the team, typically shop floor and finance and accounting, now I get it. Now, this is how it works. That means we need to change the configuration. Yes, always fix the configuration, because this is what I've seen very often. WIP account, balance sheet, WIP account, WIP items, boom, WIP account here. Now you do this, your WIP items post into WIP, and your WIP account using the same, and then good luck trying to reconcile your inventory at the end of the month if at the end of the month you have production orders that are not finished. It is a nightmare. So we must not confuse WIP items, which are semi-products, countable physical stock, with inventory WIP, which is primarily for accounting and cost accounting purposes. If we start mixing up the 2, we will end up doing something incredibly complex, which very often, if not always, requires updating the configuration and essentially doing some adjustments before numbers start, reconciling once again. So, 47 minutes. I planned to be live only for 30 minutes. We end up with 45 minutes, a bit more, as it often happens. These are complex subjects. I hope you find it beneficial. Next week, we will do another LinkedIn Live, and I planned to take from what we discovered today, what we learned today, and give you an example of a production order for these finished pizzas, because now we got the data, we got the setup, and why not, right? We can just use it. So as usual, you can see it's fairly unscripted, and we will fix the configuration and the setup on the fly, because this is how I like doing, how I'm working. It's more engaging, in my opinion, and it gives you a better idea of how the system works. But again, I'm hoping to hear from you. What would you like to see next week? Again, I try to go live every Monday. It might not always be possible because I work with clients also. I often travel. But again, once a week, we should be able to get on live here on LinkedIn to learn more about it. Manal, can we get a notification when you have a live video, please? A notification? I suspect LinkedIn does send you a notification if you follow me. When I have a live video, I can create or I can just create what's it called? An event. There we go. That's the word I wanted to find. A LinkedIn event, right? I'll create a LinkedIn event, and then you'll get notified. But if you follow me, you should get a notification when I go live, and you can watch it live or you can watch it afterwards. Manal. So there we go. Andreas, it would be good to have a training to distinguish the semi-finished goods and the WIP account in Business Central. Great question, Andreas. Thank you very much. You see, that's the kind of question that tells me, we're moving forward, we're working together, because you, Andreas, exactly find out what follows this example. Now that we have the simple structure, how about the the difference between these semi-finished products and WIP account, because the accounting part of what we discuss pretty much drives operations, right? And so, thank you for that. And it's going to be absolutely the topic of next week training is going to be how to distinguish, how to segregate, how to differentiate, and how to configure Business Central so that the posting don't end up mixed up between semi-finished goods and WIP accounts. So a bit of cost accounting, a bit of Business Central, not too much. You don't need to be a qualified accountant. I am not, but I'm confident discussing accounting topics in Business Central. We will do exactly that next week. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. I hope you found it beneficial. Again, please share your comments and give me your feedback. And again, share this video with your colleagues so that others can learn. And I'll see you all online here on LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. And if you want, go get a pizza. Right? All right. Thank you all. Bye.